let's move to the heart of the beast, so to speak, of 10,015. The core items. I think you were all now waiting for it and ready for it. Here is the following. First, most likely, in your organizations, you have this. This being on this, we call it figure 2, where you have a scheme how to organize training. There's a certain logic to it, as you see from the circles that we have at the top. We look at the training needs analysis. Yep. We come down here. Most organizations, they start with this. There's some sense of a need. Based on the need, then training is organized. We have here design specifications where the decision has to be taken. What form of training, lecturing, simulation, whatever, role play or blended learning. Then we have to decide who can actually deliver this. As you know, university professors are not necessarily good trainers. Trainers, on the other hand, are not necessarily good at giving an elaborate analytical presentation. Do you have the people to deliver? After having delivered training, was it the thing that was required or needed? Do an evaluation. If it wasn't, get back up on the top, start anew and go again through the whole cycle. But there is a system whereby each step is an input to the next step, and the output turns into an input for the next step, and so on. And in the middle here, that's what normally training departments do. They're there to overview the whole process, hire and recruit external trainers, if that's the case, or you do it in-house. They're in charge of the whole process, and that, I think, exists in most companies, or most of this. So that in itself, I would almost say, is not worth to bother about going through any certification. Where the real value added is about 10,015 is it combines this slide with this one. As you see at the bottom, here we got again this circle. That's what we normally do, but it is linked to this other figure. And basically, it is the combination of organizational performance and individual performance. So to say that, why do you spend money doing training? What's it about? So there should be, from the top down, a certain logic as to something is not going right in our company. We don't achieve certain goals. Why is it? Is it related to the people that we have? Or maybe the reason why the company is underperforming is because it's in the wrong business. It has the wrong products, the wrong machines. That's not a training issue. That's another issue, another decision that needs to be taken. But if the company performance is below expectations, it's linked to people, then we can take it to the next step. Why is it that our people don't produce what we think they could produce? What holds them back? And again, that's not necessarily only a training issue, but you might take across here the question, maybe they're paid too low, and the labor market gives them opportunities to get for the same type of work a much better pay. They feel underpaid, underappreciated. Maybe they have a leadership which is basically a leader that's incompetent. They have issue and fights and are unhappy and don't work. It's maybe an organizational problem. It's not necessarily a training solution that is being required. But if all of the other things here are not the main factor, people don't produce, there's something about they cannot produce something because they lack competencies. They lack specific knowledge or skills. And if that's the case, then there's still one more step where one can say, well, all right, we have a portfolio of competencies that we don't have at the moment in our company. Let's hire in new people who have these competencies. Or we train up the people today or in our company and help them reach that level that we expect them to reach. And then here the logic will be, yes, now let's do an organized training. Hence, once the training has been completed, then it shouldn't end up here or with the evaluation, but it will go back up. It will cascade up in the sense that there should be a documentable transfer of learning to performance, to application. And that's the basic difference between education and training. Education, I could go to university, get a medical degree, and decide never to practice as a doctor. That's my decision. Maybe foolish to spend 8 years going to learn something I don't use, but it's my decision, right? Versus training, the idea is people benefit and learn something, but they're also learning this on behalf of the company. So both should benefit, the person who learns and the company who pays for that and expects a return on this investment. Hence, training, this is the core of 10,015, basically. These two slides. Now, let me go into more detail about the actual 10,015. You have in blue a copy of it, which is an excerpt of what the standard is all about. So I'll take you step by step. So whatever you see now on the next following slides are actually here in the standard, all right? So as normally is the case with all the standards, ISO standards, you have an introductory part, a foreword, what this is all about, the scope, what does it relate to in terms of other standards, the normative references, and so on. That's the introductory part. Then it is here we go into the articles and the clauses. 4.1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's a guideline standard based on this four-stage process. I showed it to you just before, the first circle. 4.2 is how to define training needs, design and plan for training, provide for training, and evaluate for training. And 5, monitoring, that's that part in the middle of the circle, to see a whole training process through from beginning to the end. May I have this? So you see at the bottom, and I mean at the end, that there in this full standard are tables, and that's partially the annex that I'm alluding to. Each point or each article is backed up by a table which lets you know what you are supposed to have. So if we were to come and visit you for certification, we would look at all of these points. All of these points have to be addressed by your manual, quality manual, but also, as Mr. Nair let you know, we will also come and see, we want to see how this actually is being implemented in your company.
I just wanted to say that the annex is the only part has been excerpted out. And because, this is for training purpose, well, we cannot really sort of provide you a full standard without running into the IP issue. So if you go to the www.iso.org, you could buy a copy online. And that, I think for each company, you at least should have one genuine original copy. Otherwise, I think that the Indian Bureau for Standardization also sells this
Yeah.
standard. So that might be easier for you to do. But otherwise, ISO.org has a ISO shop online. And otherwise, the whole standard is pretty much here. But the annex, the usefulness of the annex is gives you a roadmap which is indicating the input-output relationship and also the useful records that you might want to consider to include.
Okay. Now, all the slides that I'm going to show you, wherever there is at the, on the side or on the top here, it says ISO 10015, it basically means it's as is written in the standard. So here is a first excerpt about definition. What is 10015? It's a planned, systematic training process can make an important contribution to help organizations to improve their capabilities and to meet its quality objectives. This training process is illustrated in the training cycle diagram, which I have shown you just before. It's an international standard, and that's also a plus. It's an internationally valid standard in 52 countries. We voted on this standard. It exists. There are a lot of national standards which can be very useful too. But if they're only valid for India, all the companies who are also active in other countries would have the difficulties in terms of application to other contexts. All right, now, it applies to all organizations, meaning private sector, public sector, government, all types of organizations. It is aiming at helping companies improve in a continuous manner, improve on its performance by focusing on training. And why? It is to help a company fulfill the requirements that are based on the customers as well as other stakeholders, their demands in regards to the company's products and services. Here is again the simplified first figure that I've shown you just briefly before. Let me backtrack and go back up again so you see it, what I mean. This figure is in more detail. This one here is what was the agreed and negotiated international version of this first figure. But the system and the rationale is the same. Basically to say a company should have a business plan. It should analyze its needs based on the business plan, and then go and walk down here to have that logic of finding out, well, what do we want to do? What can we not do? Is it related to people, competencies? Well, we don't have these competencies. We will organize training, and again, it goes back up again. It should mean basically through training, the company was able to deliver the services that it intends to put into the market. 4.1.1 starts now with, for selecting and implementing training to close the gaps between required and existing competence. Now the company, you in that sense help the company define what's required. The requirement is based on your analysis of what you cannot do at the moment, what competencies are missing, and what need to be, in that sense, acquired through training. Then it's about training, defining and training needs, designing training, providing the training, evaluating. We already talked about it. Now, in the standard, you have the same now, the figure that I've shown you also at the very beginning of this short presentation. The logic is the same, but as you can see here, it doesn't go up. It's not linked to the organizational business objectives. Basically, we've seen organizations where this process is like a closed circuit. And training institutions or training centers in large organizations can actually almost be like small schools or universities. they do their best, organize training that they think is useful for the company, but when you ask them, why do you do what you do? They have difficulty saying, because we have identified the following business objectives cannot be met because our people don't have such and such competencies, and based on that we have organized training. There is and it's not to be blamed on the training department nor on the HR department, because oftentimes line managers don't want to be bothered. Right? They say, you know your business, you do training, you know what we kind of need, go ahead. Afterwards, the same people who don't want to take responsibilities are very quickly to say, oh, we don't know what these training people in HR, what they do. Maybe they could do a better job and so on. But they're not involved. And if they're not involved, the training people and HR people are left a bit abandoned, guessing what they should do, but they don't get clear marching orders in the sense a clearly stated request by line managers in terms of what you're supposed to do. So 10,015 also is, on one hand, maybe a burden. You have to fulfill the requirements and documentation and so on. But I can assure you it also gives you very good reasons to knock at the doors of top management and line management. Because there's no certification without that you can show that you talk to the line management, which in fact are your clients. Right? You organize training so that the people who are sent to take your training can do a better job wherever they are in your organization. So 10,015 basically says we do all of this, but we do it in a certain logic and a context. That is, we deliver services to the different line managers. We don't do this as a standalone school. 4.5.1, the purpose of evaluation is to conform that both, again here we go back to this dual approach, organizational objectives and training objectives. The individual employee learns, but not just for his or her own sake of learning, but learns so it could be useful for the organization. 4.5, 5.1, the inputs or the evaluation of training outcomes are the specifications for training needs and the training plan, and the records for the delivery of training. And it continues. In terms of, you can just follow the slide, you have it in your the handout in blue. This is all it lists. It informs you what is stated in the standard and what we as a certifier, for instance, together with you will be looking for. Now, what is the Advocate 10,015 certification standard? That will be, I will pass the word to Lichia. For what I've just shown you, are there any questions that you have at this stage about the text, the requirements as they're written in the standard? Is that okay? Is it just a digestive moment of being in a comfortable place? But if it is okay, then let's move on immediately in that sense. Okay, Lichia, to you.
Yeah, when you read the standards carefully, you probably will see in the introduction, and this is one of the frequently asked questions, saying, one is that if you're very familiar with the ISO system, you said 10,000 series is guideline, is not meant for certification. And second, that when you read the text, it says it's not intended for certification. So the big questions will be thrown up and saying, but why, how come you're actually using these standards for certification purpose? And how would Swiss Accreditation Service, which is the equivalent of the Indian Bureau of Standardization, will actually accredit an organization like ours to be the certification body looking at quality management system? And this is the session that I want to address that question. The key thing is that when you read this ISO 10015 standards very carefully, you will see that it is a description of a standardized operational process, SOP, about training. However, it does not give you any indication or requirements in terms of what a quality management system for training is all about. So in order to fulfill the requirements for a quality management system for training, we have to add some additional requirements, and that is really the composition of the adequate 10015 plus is all about. However, the plus is not only about requirements. The plus is actually strengthening some of the vague area inside of the standards. So I would like to go through that with you quickly, so you will know, when you apply for certification, what will be the necessary understanding. So the first thing, what I would like to say is that, as you know, in any of the ISO standards, everything will be written in shall, S-H-A-L-L, shall. Shall is a legalistic term that means you must. But in terms of the existing ISO 10015, you have to change everywhere when the word of should comes up. So should has to be automatically understood as shall. So all the things that related to should sounds like a recommendation. It's actually a must. The may or might include is also understood as shall include. Okay, so now the language is very clear in the sense of what you have to do. And also, it has to address the basic organizational and communication issues. What are the organization and communication issues? We need to know how does the training function is actually organized throughout the organization, not in your department, right? If you could recall the figure 1, it starts with the performance gaps, and the performance gap is organizational, and so that you have a current performance gap, meaning that current operational issues, performance issues, but such as you're supposed to achieve the target of market share by 20%, but you only got 15%, so you have a current issue. But there's also some long-term development issues, which is strategic. So we have actually two beginning of this process. One is future and one is the current. So we need to know how you actually organize this using training as a strategic instrument to achieve performance issues. So we need to see how this process, who is responsible for what. Second thing, another thing we need to do is that you need to address the internal inspection and audit. The player and the referee should be different. So where are you going to give the responsibility for internal check to avoid inconsistency? For instance, you're delivering more than 4,000 training days per year. That means there are many training processes going on throughout the year, and you want to use this system to make it actually consistent, so no much deviation. And therefore, you need to have an internal audit function, a procedure for this. And that also will link it to your sort of continuous improvement. Also need to have a basic structure requirements for a quality management system. So what are these? Let me jump forward to that. A basic structure, basically when we talk about a quality management system, we're talking about a set of documents. And this document is putting into a handbook or a manual, and it's structured in 4 levels. How many of you in terms of your company do not have ISO 9001 system? Please raise your hand. Okay, we have 3. Do you
they have other?
Do you have other quality management systems such as for environment 14,000? Yes, you do. Or for other systems. So you have a good idea what.
Which one do you have? 22. Okay.
Okay. So you have that. And sometimes you also use TS or other or TQM. So doesn't matter which system you're using. It will consist of these 4 levels. One is on the manual part that gives you the training policy. And here also it gives you some indication in terms of how the training process is actually organized. I think in the presentation made by Hari, he mentioned that the linking of strategic planning that they have using the PMS system, and also break it down to competence requirement for department for jobs. And these are the linkages that you need to consider very carefully. The second level will consist of the procedures. How do you write procedures? And this is really the guidance for you to write a procedure which fits your organization. Okay, the procedures basically is to indicate how are you going to take a step-by-step process approach to draw the workflow. The third part, and this is an important part, this is actually a lot of know-how comes in here, is the work instruction. How do you determine what will be the best learning methods? Is that the best using individual learning, self-study, or in class, or on the job, or using action research, action learning, which Hari was talking about, or other methods? How do you go about determine what will be the most appropriate methodology? How do you determine what kind of evaluation methods will be most appropriate for what kind of training programs or training or learning objectives? This is where you put your job aid. The idea is that if you are capturing many things that you are doing intuitively or by specialists and put it into a system, then it's much easier for you to go up in scale or clone yourself. Right? There's a lot of know-how inside of the organization. It's learning by doing and accumulated over the years and need to be captured in this part. And the last part is the records. So the records, it's the last part. So once you have done this 4, and go back to where I was, sorry about this scrolling, what can be certifiable? What we consider certifiable are 2 different types of things. The first is the training product. Of course, a quality management system fits for a product such as mid-level management leadership program or mid-level management development program. A quality management system in essence would look the same, but the scope will be smaller. And this might be one idea of how do you start with this process. The second scope will be the complete system, meaning the training management function. And this is really covering all departments, covering all kind of training programs that you're going to have. And this is a little bit more complex. We accept application for both type of scope. With the idea is to saying once you sort out and or one location, once you have sort of sort out and visualize and and codify your practice, it's much easier for you to replicate to other places. So what are the questions? The questions we are addressing is actually looking at, is your system developed in accordance to 10,015 and adequate interpretation? So if I would like to, allow me to draw your attention to look at 4.2.1. The first sentence under 4.2.1 general, it reads, the training process should be initiated after a needs analysis of the organization has been conducted and competence-related issues have been recorded as depicted in Figure 1 in the introduction. The second sentence it says, the organization should define the competence needed for each task. that affects the quality of products, assess the competence of the personnel to perform the task, and develop plans to close any competence gaps that may exist. Figure 1, you find it in the introduction section. And most people, when they read these standards, they ignore the introduction, they don't bother about the first 1, 2, 3, they'll go straight to the chapter 4. And so, and also, they say figure 1, okay. And so they tend to start with the competence management model. And I would just wanted to say, competence model, it's fine, as long as you know what kind of animal we're going to dress this competence model to fit. Okay, so please, we have seen so many times in pre-audit or certification process that figure 1 was always the first step, diagnosing your organizational performance needs. That has been missing as a critical point. So I just wanted to highlight that. The second thing, it is not good enough that to implement such a training system, management system just for a few products, unless that's your declaration and that's what you want to do. And not only on some sort of key performance organizations. We would like to, for certification purpose, we need to see really a universal deployment. And it is not an easy task. And I will warn you this, because you will realize very quickly, figure 1 is not the task of the training department. It's not your job trying to figure out what is the sort of performance objectives down to each department and down to each post and each level. It is the management's task. And here, please, 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 if we really want to be their strategic partner, let's act like one. So what does that mean? How do you persuade your partner, in life or in work, to actually move the direction? And so you need to do internal promotion, you have to do communication, you have to really establish a lot of goodwill. And goodwill is because you provide useful service. Okay, so here when we talk about ISO 10015 System Plus, and we're really talking about a collaborative environment and approach to making sure that people coming into our organization, indeed, they are our capital. It's our investment into the future. So this is really where you need to go. So you will see that some departments, if they are not convinced, when we come for audit, they actually haven't done it. They have no records to prove that they have done their performance analysis and to give you a very clear training specification. So let's have a look what kind of training specification we are talking about. In 4.2.7, it reads, when a training solution is selected to close the competence gap, training needs should be specified and documented. And the specification for training needs should be documented, the objectives and the expected outcomes of the training. Here, this is your learning contract between the training service provider and the management, the client. And the input to the specification for training needs should be provided by the list of competence requirements found in 4.2.3. And the document should become part of the training plan specification and should include a record of the organization's objective, which will be considered as input for design and planning training and for monitoring the training process. So you could see that the partnership indeed has shifted the role of the HRD and the training function from design delivery, logistic management, to diagnostic, to thinking together, and to ensuring the analysis of the organizational performance needs, which leads to training, is actually accurately done. So there's a lot of emphasis really on the diagnostic part. And that's figure 1. Figure 1 is a decision-making matrix. It gives you the insurance and also gives you the clue in terms of what kind of evaluation indicator will be used at the final end of a training process. And this is a partnership engagement. It is not just a service provider. Okay. So Transfer on the job. We all know if people don't like the course, they're not motivated. And if if they have not learned, they cannot really use it. But these two is easier to tackle. The third one is really actually more difficult. So to ensure training transfer, when do you think the work needs to be done? Front end or back end? Let me hear the gentleman sitting at far corner of the room. Yes. What do you think? To ensure transfer of learning, meaning after people going back from training, they will actually use it. Is this a front end work, or as part of the as part of your preparation for training, or it is actually something you're worried about when you come to evaluation? Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. And so if you look at that, you will go to 2 pages down. If you go to 4.4, it says providing for the training. And the 4.4.2 is about providing support. There's pre-training support and training support and end of training support. Okay. And in the training support, one of the things is about provide relevant and adequate opportunities for the training to apply the competence being developed. Please read this not inside of the classroom only. It actually has to be after. After the classroom engagement, it's after they have gone back to their team, to their job place. And this is where you need to put certain things in place. And if you do this well, you will get your level 4 results. Some people say, wow, this is a lot of additional work. However, if you have the sign-on of the managers, it is their balanced scorecard. It's their performance indicators at stake, not necessarily only yours. So they are the most interested to actually cooperate and provide the necessary support. What I have found in some of the sort of the top number 1, number 2 organizations of the world, oftentimes you will see that training department only manage the most basics. New recruits, orientation training, fixed before promotion training, but all these sort of dynamic, just-in-time, problem-based training are actually managed and handled by the management themselves with other partners. We should reflect on this why. Okay, so I think we need to start thinking really from a systematic manner rather than looking at activities. Activity is really not our job. Our job is to manage a training process that runs from A to Z. Okay, so I just would like to invite you to read this very carefully, and you will see that we'll come back and ask these questions. And I think the front end loading. Let me just sort of belabor the point a little bit. In the 4.3.4, training plan specification. If we compare when we give sort of purchasing order for training, it is oftentimes 1 page or 2 page, never go beyond 10. But if we see how we go through and prepare a tender document to buy IT infrastructure, we tend to become much more detailed. And this here is really the minimum. The training plan specification is before you're purchasing, you'll start to purchase internally or externally a training service. And the item I, if you can go down the list, the I is criteria and methods developed for the evaluation and training outcomes to measure Okay, so it is not fair to start thinking about evaluation after the whole thing is done and over. You need to start thinking about what you want to evaluate, what you're going to be looking at, and how do you make sure that you're actually going to have a success. Right? And this is really the key point about what 10,015 is all about. I think I somehow managed to run my...
Lichia, we can move
yeah.
to this.
Yeah. Okay, so with all this said, let me just sort of shut it down for the moment. With all this said, could you please take out this sheet? This is really the gap analysis instrument that we're using to help us and to help you to determine where you are. So you should have it in that plastic packet. Can you see what it is?
You
okay.
have it, yeah.
Who doesn't have it? You know, outside on the door, on the desk, there are some. Okay.
How many don't have it? One.
Right. Okay. So if you look at the checklist item, you will have 26 items. This consists of the complete system that you need to have. And the second column, it says ISO 10015 point. And the numbers basically give you an indication where you can find the original text. Okay? And the third, adequate point. These are the additional points and emphasis that we have added on in order to transform a training process into a training quality management system. Okay, so you need to also do that. The checklist point, I'm just indicating that to show you that what we will be looking sort of to start. Okay, so I would like now to turn the process to you and ask you to take a few minutes to think of your own organization and to use the scoring. The scoring A, that doesn't apply. B is where the difficult, where you actually don't have the system. C means you have the system but doesn't work very well. And D means that you should do something about. Okay, so please give yourself look your own system B, C, D ranking. The ones who doesn't exist, of course, you can leave it blank.
I think
So
to make it easier, just let's stay with one column A. You have what you don't have.
okay,
They have
to be
what don't
faster.
have,
Okay, so this is what we normally do when we come to your organization. But for the exercise purpose, we just ask yourself what you have and what you don't have. So please use the column A. The ones you have, you tick. The ones you don't have, leave it blank. And I know some of you come actually with your colleague. At this moment, maybe you don't want to sit together, but just do individual observation at this moment.
The table with the people who sit next to you, share what you have, and then also discuss already Well, if you were to consult each other, what would you suggest where to start? How to fill in all the, how to be able to check off the whole list?
Interesting conversation. So Raymond was saying, well, listen, I think there might have a general relevance. So I would like just to sort of start out by two questions that was addressed by two different groups. And I think maybe it's a common concern. The first question, was related to item 7. No, sorry, item 10, organizational objective, organizational analysis. Let's look at including the change projects part second. Organizational analysis basically is tackling, here we are talking about procedure. ISO system basically has very clear, about different sort of work process, and then you have to have a procedure. Procedure is how do you do it. So organizational analysis, here we are suggesting that most of the time, training department, even when you make your annual training plan, you do not look at your own company's annual report. You do not necessarily take that into consideration. Second, you might not have access, and most likely do not have the access, to look at your business strategic plan for next year or next 5 years. So here we are suggesting that you need to develop a procedure to say what kind of information that will give you enough of an indication to know where is the problem, what will be the future like, and to start you off on the first step of the figure 1. If you don't know the gap, there's no signal, there's no reason, there's no raison d'etre for any action. For training. Especially, starting the diagnostic path of the figure 1 and don't even come to talk about training. So if you don't have a process addressing this, you basically have a blind system. Right? You have a routine system, you have a blind system. It's just hopefully because the program has hired a very famous person from somewhere and it's going to work. And then you hope that your participants are so ingenious and very creative and they're going to do the job by themselves just because they got the light. So I think we need to sort of take out all this sort of a luck, sort of a haphazard, ad hoc elements out and make sure that when we do our annual plan and look at what are the training inputs really need, or now training issues that need to be addressed by starting looking at our annual report and our strategic plan. You have those information, but you don't have access. So you need to create a process and a procedure to access this information to help you to do your job better.
Okay, that was 10, huh?
So that's number 10. And there's a second question about resources. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say about what is change projects. Change projects can relate to a major investment decision that has been taken by the CEO. A major investment decision might be the CEO says, we have really a lot of trouble by working in the emerging markets, and we need to make sure that our integrity is not affected. That will be a major project. That will have implications in terms of training. So, these might be a once in a while or just once type of a one-time type of projects. But the system will help you to capture that. So you need to put a footnote somewhere saying these projects also should come into your domain. Because, it would initially is a change project, but it needs to be institutionalized. Because integrity issue is not for today, it's for always. Sustainability issue is not for today, it's for always. So there are some fundamental issues initially started out and kicked off as a change project, and you just need to find a way to institutionalize it, to routinize it, and become part of your practice. So next question was asked about what is the number 4, resource management. Probably this word is a little bit...
Lichia, may I just interject one thing? If you take 4.2.3, then what Lichia just said, you see it here again. And that is the second paragraph of 4.2.3 says that the definition of an organization's future needs relative to its strategic goals and quality objectives, there you look at the larger picture of the organization. Where's your company going to? Is it acquiring another company? Is it building a new plant? Is it going through reorganization? This will all have consequence for the training department.
Yeah. And the second question was item 4, resource management. The training department cannot have one person and try to do everything. You know, we have, as a training function, we have our own resource requirement in terms of number of people, the strength of our man table, and also need to have resources. If I go into the training department, a lot of times what I see is that you have an operational budget for you to pay, you know, some programs, but you have no budget really to talk about, to tackle the analytic part, to prepare your annual program. At the best, you circulate a survey and say, ask everybody what kind of courses you would like to have, and then you put that together as a training catalog, and then you put it out into your internal market and ask people to buy. Right? So it's very much of a push approach. It's a supply approach. And here, basically, to say that you're going to move from a supply approach to a demand-driven approach, you need to have some resources to allow you to do some of that. And we need to see it. So in your quality statement and policy, you cannot just say, we are committed to provide 60 training days per year per person. You know, that's the Motorola commitment. But you got to, you know, if you think of the other work that's make sure that this 60 training days is going to be worthwhile for that person, for that person's unit, for that person's department, and for the total, you have to have some resources to do that. So you have to be reasonable. And we will be looking and say, this doesn't look like it's going to work. Right? And also evaluation. Evaluation, since, you know, we're saying evaluation is a front-end activity. You need to have some resources beyond just delivering those training days. So that's what it means. The last part. The last person in the organization deserves training is the training department. Right? And the HR shouldn't spend any money on your own staff development.
You're already perfect.
Yeah, you're already perfect. Right? So that is the fundamental issue. We are talking about today if we believe people is the critical matter inside the organization, and the learning processes is a critical mission for the organization's future. Please, 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 we got to see something real. And something real has something to do with your resource management.
Maybe the other...
Yeah, okay. I just have a little comment. If you cannot prove that you're actually delivering at level 4 or minimum level 3, it will be a very difficult case.
Is it clear what level 3 means?
Level 3 meaning individuals are actually working, using those, you know, whatever they learned, the skills, the attitude, the knowledge, and the boss says, you know, this guy, after he came back from training, he is a different person. Or this lady, you know, she is just become so efficient that it's just remarkable. I'm going to send you more people. So you at least you get that kind of a reputation inside, right? But if you can really go on to level 4, you will have your resources. So, gentlemen and ladies, this is my expectation. Value added, who is the value added, is actually you will be able to be properly endowed to do what you set out to do.
Okay, let's see if there are other questions you might have about the different items. Well,
That was
No.
that. Any other
Yeah.
questions? Wow, great.
Okay, if
It's
not,
all-
then let's do the next step. And please come forward. I've written on these 3 flip chart pages the same items that we have on this page, 26. So depending on your own analysis of your organization, just, you know, put a little dash next to each one where you don't, what you don't yet have. So we're looking at the gaps just to get an overview of what needs to be done in the different companies that you represent. Okay? So wherever you are not yet fulfilling the requirements, just, you know, make a little, what do you call it, a dash, a mark next to it.
So you want people to fill in the blank, right? Where they have a blank in market.
Where they are not yet ready because there's something is not yet
You ask
done.
people to say yes and no. So
Yeah, just to come forward and to mark it up on these 3 flip chart pages, please.
So I encourage you to take the after lunch, after study exercise. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a task. Involving your clients. Your clients are, for instance, the line managers who send people to your training programs. Okay, that's number 14. And which one was the second one that you asked? 22. Validating of training methodology, double and triple looping, meaning we'd like to see that after training has been done, that you assess whether the right type of method was used. It basically takes you back to the training design to find out, both from the people who took your training as well as their supervisors, whether they learned what they're supposed to learn, or whether maybe the methodology was not appropriate to achieve the learning objectives. Thanks for your question. Guess where we have the highest scores, where the tallies show the biggest gaps in all of the organizations, combined now of the organizations that you represent. What's your guess? What's your guess? We have 26 items. Of all the people present here who, entered and tallied, which one of the 26 turned out to be the biggest gaps? I mean, biggest meaning the most common gaps in all of the organizations that you represent. Which one? 11, you're saying? One said 11. No, not the case. It's almost, let's make a little lottery here. Let's see who wins the first prize. 2. 2 is on the higher end, but not the highest. 22nd. Yes. 22nd, and 22nd shares the number 1 place with which other number? No, 25. 25 and 22nd were 11 times marked. So there, clearly there's a gap that is shared by many of you here present. I also have 24, 10 times indicated, was missing. And I also have 20, 10 times. And then the next score is 7, a clear authority, meaning to have clarity, who is in charge of training, who is responsible. We got 9. And then come a few of 7, such as 1 and 2, and 10, and 19. These were at the level of 7. So it is interesting from a just purely now training expert point of view. 22nd in a way, I think you should have. If I can say should or should not, some of the aspects here are more quality related, which you might not have because you don't have a quality system. But if we were to limit ourselves just to the figure 2, you know, the circle, how to organize training, validating your training methodology would be useful to do. In other words, not to assume that just the way you do things is fine. And normally you find out whether it's the wrong or the right thing is, of course, through evaluations with the people who take the course, and then follow up after they've taken the course, and then talking also ideally to their supervisors to get an idea whether, you know, something remained after the 4-day course that they've taken, that you've organized with them. That's 22. Yeah.
I was asked by some of you here, what does it mean double and triple looping? And I think you probably are very familiar with Peter Singe's book about the learning organization, but less familiar with Chris Argyris' organizational learning theory. Because learning organization is identity, you are it. Right? But that's not the purpose to call yourself a learning organization. The purpose is to foster continuous learning at the collective level. Right? The organization as a whole, everybody in it, that will always sort of will be continually learn and transform that learning into process innovation or product or service innovation. And this is really where Peter Singe was talking about questioning assumptions. Okay, we got to question assumptions about the things. What makes leadership effective? What makes performance possible through learning? There's quite a bit of assumptions we are making in the work we do, and we hope that by having this system and collect the data allows you to actually go back to ask such sort of meta-level questions, and so that you can indeed transform, as the CEO of UBS said. He said, learning is our secret weapon. And that, he thinks, is the only competitive advantage for their sector. So I think, for you, yesterday we were told in India, already 53% of your GDP is of service. And I think, this will be very important to think about that. How can you sort of, because you go into a quality assurance system, that you ensure your organizational learning is actually realized, so that you can be truly a learning organization.
Okay, now one more point. Is there any comments you would like to make about what we found as a group, where the biggest gaps are?
Were you surprised?
No? So you know already what needs to be done in case you want to get certified. Actually, to get certified as such is...
Do you have some kind of a size in mind when you are talking about this particular system? Like an organization has this sort of turnover? Does it have to have this kind of a turnover, or is the size has to be 4,000, 5,000 strong?
It doesn't have to be that big, but big enough that there is somebody in the organization who is responsible for training. If it's a very small organization, more or less people do training on the side, maybe as a fourth or 1/5 of their job function is also to do training. Then it's still possible, but most likely the small companies, they procure training from outside. They don't organize it themselves. So there it would be useful to then help them through the 10,015 become more mindful as to what they buy when they buy in training from outside. It's easier if it's a bigger organization because there's already a training manager and a training department. That actually brings me to another topic we discussed briefly before. Yeah, it's one thing to have certification it's another to get there. And Lichia will say more about that shortly, but the real job to get ready for certification, of course, means somebody has to do the job, and it's either done by an internal consultant or an external consultant. Sometimes the quality people of a company who already know how such a quality system functions, they can be helpful to help you figure out how this whole thing, the logic of such a quality management system. However, we also found that people who are 100% quality managers do not necessarily understand training. And there you need to help them understand what you do. And ideally it's a combination of both. Some people who can help you, who are either in your company or who come from outside, who know how quality management systems, how they function, how to get certified, and somebody then also who helps your organization get ready for it organizationally. That's more like a training expert. But all that could be done internally or via an external expert. Any other questions or comments as to what we just did now? No. Okay.
So can I just add a comment? The reason why we do this exercise is actually to help you to remember, to recall, to identify what you already have. And the 10,015 system is to link what you already have, which is scattered at different places, and also and to make it more robust and to make it perform better and more effectively. So you really should need to start where you are. And I'm sure that, unless you like the gentleman was telling me, it's a brand new company, then it's a greenfield exercise. Otherwise, you have a lot of other quality system or different management system. The task is really to link it, to put it into one manual, one binder, so the training function or the HRD function can use it in a very convenient way and link it to other relevant departments. Use this process as a way to renegotiate, your access to certain information and things like that. Just for one example, I said, strategic plan, business plan, oftentimes you don't have access to look, right? But that really gives you what really matters, right? If you don't have access to business plan except yours, it's not really good enough. So I would ask you to consider the development of this ISO 10015 plus system is really about, it is an organizational development process. And it needs to be seen and understood as such. And at final end is, you have a functioning and potentially a very satisfactory training process.
Just wanted to say one more word about evaluation of training. You probably, who doesn't know about, for instance, Kirkpatrick or the Phillips curve? You probably are familiar with it. They're like a ladder here, in the sense that after people have taken a training program, you give them a form to fill in. It's sometimes negatively described as the happy scale. Were you happy with what happened over the last 3 days, and the food and the lodging and all that, and logistics? That certainly is important if it is also added to or linked to plan of action, where you ask them, what are your plans after this training is over? Are you planning to have a feedback session with the head of your department? How are you going to implement and apply what you've learned? Then it's a bit more forward-looking, and it's also useful to think of application rather than only the happy scale. The second one is evidence of acquisition of new knowledge and new skills. And ideally this is done by a pre and post test. Now when people, before they come, maybe you can send them a questionnaire, or when they start at the beginning, give them a questionnaire, or let them have a test to find out what do they already know and what do they now consciously understand they don't know yet. And at the end of the course, to give them a similar test so they can see whether, and you too, whether they acquired new skills and new competencies. Then 3 and 4 is moving to the job site. That is, after they've taken your course, went back to where they work, have they been able to apply? And that normally can be done with a questionnaire, a follow-up, 3 months afterwards. You can either, have a focus group, ask them to come and tell you what happened. Maybe you hear that the management was very negative about any application, which then will call for a meeting with management to find out why there is such a resistance to making use of the newly acquired skills and knowledge. And then the business impact is also, of course, you'd like to see whether performance has improved. And for that, you need benchmarks. And that's again one other additional reason to what Lichia said before. If you see the business plan, if you've talked to the heads of different departments, and you found out what their concerns are about, and what their hopes and expectations are vis-à-vis you, that you, with your training that you provide and organize, the business performance will pick up and would improve. And then finally, at the end, you can also calculate the return on investment. It's cumbersome, it's a difficult process to do, sometimes useful to do because it involves a whole strategic reassessment of the money spent on training. And also it helps you to justify why you should exist, even at times when there is a downturn in the economy. But for certification, you don't have to have an assessment of return on investment. What we would expect certainly is 1 and 2 and 3. That you show that you have, in that sense, been able to organize the after training, the application of training to show the usefulness of what training is supposed to have contributed.
Start talking in bilaterally about how to proceed if you are interested to get certificate, or even just to take this conversation a little bit further. First thing I like to say is that a lot of information is available at our website, and the website is the adequate.org. You will see on the first page of the material that is listed. But specifically, if you do not want, you don't find our website for whatever reason, you can also contact us through info@adequate.org to get the application form. On the application form, it actually asks for a few basic information, because one of the key questions, of course, is the cost. How much does it cost? And we cannot really answer this question very straightforwardly. Part of the reason is the major cost is really the mandate when we have to come on site, because we can have a clear control in terms of when we study your quality manual in our office. That is very straightforward. We know how much time it takes to go through the document. But to come to you and to actually do the certification audit, we need to know the size, not so much of the people, but it's how you organize. And so we need to see your organogram, and then we estimate in terms of what is the actual mandate that will be required. So from a project cost point of view, I think when I talk about cost, that's the result. The real cost is not so much a certification. The real cost is the preparation to get the job done, because you need to put, I will talk about this a little while, but you do need to put some manpower to this task. Sometimes people hire a consultant, but that costs more. So whatever you're going to have direct and indirect cost. So if you send in your signed application and the needed requirements, we could prepare a commercial proposal. But at the same time, we will send you our certification standard, so you can have some guidelines blueprint to follow through. And what I would suggest is that you use our form, because when we do document review, we will use the form that you just did the exercise. I wanted to see, the first thing we want to see is that, is your system complete? Because indeed, sometimes you can say, well, you know, even though human beings all have 2 legs, but sometimes human beings have only 1. You can still have some other ways to cope with it. But we need to see what is the other thing to cope with it to supplement that function. It's not necessary you have to have 25 procedures, so we don't care, you know, or 25 items. What we need to see is the completeness, and we can easily identify. If we can identify it, other people in your organization can also identify it. So it has to be user-friendly. The second thing we wanted to ask is really, is your system function in the organization for real? And is it function well? So we will assess based on our own expertise and years of experience in this field. We will just sort of look at your functionality. And then finally, not the first time, but finally with the first round of certificate, our basic expectation is that you can present a very loud and beautiful and very convincing return on investment report to your CEO. And then we're actually going to see your organization, your own training organization grow and prosper. And this, I'm not joking. I'm not joking in the sense that we have seen organizations, they realize that, just to have a training nucleus in the training department is really not sufficient. So they have identified ways to have sort of a cost sharing and have the assistant to the general manager of a SBU to have sort of additional function, and they have a network. So think about the very creative ways of getting the job done, but not necessarily through your own growth. So send us your application, and then we would suggest you scope and identify where's the gap. If you need to, we cannot consult you. But if you say, I don't understand what this means, that we can answer. Because the rules are very stringent. We cannot tell you how you can write a procedure, and you need to do your own internal mapping. So a task force will be useful. But please do not form a task force only within HR. You need to have a task force which covers the management, your client. When we talk about involvement of we're talking about involvement of personnel in the quality process. The personnel is really the stakeholders, people who have a stake in terms of the performance of training. So you should involve them. We have seen that the owner of this process goes either owned by the chief learning officer, if you have one, or by the senior HR, or by the senior executive for quality management. It is your choice. But the key thing is that when there is an issue or a problem being identified, somebody could give a marching order, says go, you're going to fix it. Okay, so that's what you need to think about. And this is part of your training quality manual, is to say who is the process owner and who will take responsibility and be accountable for the performance of this system. Once your quality manual is done, you can contact us and say, now we are ready to have this being reviewed, and we will come back to you with a small report, give you sort of green, red, and blue, and different indications like Mr. Nair showed to you earlier. We want to be prudent. When you're at least on paper, it looks convincing, we will come by to visit, to do an on-site visit. We don't want to show up and all of a sudden we say, wow, this is really not certifiable, and you'll be in trouble, we'll be in trouble, because everybody will be crying. So please, and that's a waste of time and money, because at this moment we have not been able to build up the partnership in India, so we can have local auditors. But this is our next step if the demand is growing. So the travel cost is quite visible. And so one of the suggestions we have is we can bundle. We can bundle 2 or 3 projects together, and then the question is, how much time do I need to actually get it ready? I don't know. Our experience is 3 to 6 months, depending on the, how healthy you are and how complete your system is, and how much time you really, how much resources that you put in to get this ready. But we are, scheduled to come back either end of December or early January. So that's the time we're going to show up. And so if we can bundle a few cases, I think it will be a win-win arrangement for everybody. Once we have done the on-site certification audit, then what we need to do is to present the whole case to our technical committee for review and control. I just wanted to let you know, even though we are a small organization, however, we have already gone through the second round of accreditation. The ISO 10015 system, ISO 10015 standard, even though it was first published in December, 15th of December 1999, it has already gone through a review. And there was the membership was decided, voted by 50 countries, and saying that it will be retained as it is. So it has been sort of gone through internal questioning, saying whether this system is really valuable and relevant and has a market place, and also our own practice. So this is we have to be quite stringent in terms of understanding how your organization, your company is actually organized, and how does the system look like, in terms of process flow before we will commence to the other work. So please bear with us and to understand why we need to ask these questions. For the SAS, the Swiss accreditation body, for them they say the reason why they agreed to make this into a certifiable system, one is on the technical credit that our organization have, and the second is because since ISO says it is not intended, it didn't say it is absolutely not. So they feel that the organizational learning and human capital are two key elements for the development of the future. So that's why they decided and go ahead and commence this, make it into a certifiable system. So this is basically how we would run. On our website, you will see this chart. It is basically a restatement of what I just said. After your self-assessment, you can have an option to have a pre-audit if you feel that is necessary. The pre-audit, we were told, and by our accreditation body, dialogue is a very important part of the learning process. Dialogue is not, as long as we don't sit down and draft your procedures, write out your manual, this is not our business. But if you have saying, okay, this is our problem, can you help me to understand? And through this dialogue, we could share some information about what we have seen as best practices and what we think. And I think that will be helpful. But it's not mandatory in terms of pre-audit. Unless you really are green field, then we suggest first year, a certificate is good for 3 years. First year will be a full audit that we will sample a good chunk of your organization, your internal clients. Second year and third year, we're trying to cover all your internal clients, and that will complete the validity of the cycle. And the next cycle starts. And unless there will be a change of standards or you have gone through a major restructuring, which is possible, then we would not have anything more than 3 audits, 1 per year. Otherwise, if you have major changes, when you notify us, if it's reasonable, we say we take it up next time. If not reasonable, then we will say, we probably have to come by and have a look. Or you have to submit your new system for us to look in order to sustain the claim that it meets the requirement. I have said that, 3 to 6 months. It's doable, and we have seen it in different parts. On-site audit, how much time does it take? Normally, we try not to be there more than 3 days. And so if we need to do a 4 days job, we will break it down to, 2 days. Or we will do a 6-day job, we break it down to 3 days. That's sort of the practice. But if you have different locations, for instance, one unit is in Delhi, one unit is in Bangalore, we need to be given the travel time. So I think this is basically the key points of yeah. So just to recap, the adequate 10,015 plus basically is to move figure 1 not as a background but into the foreground and starting as 4.0. Second, we look at the general functioning of the system. So if you have a system, that's not good enough. We would like to know how well does it work. Is it really working for you, for your company? The third, the stakeholder. It's not sufficient just to say, well, we have asked people who will come for training, because that represent their individual learning needs, not the organizational learning needs. So you need to have a broad-based stakeholder involvement. Fourth point is control of non-conformity. What do you do? Like the gentleman here was telling me, you deliver 2,000 programs a year. That's a huge amount of work. Are they all consistently following the same kind of rigorous, or do they continue to improve and review? So this is the question we will raise. Last one, since India is really the IT service kingdom, I would put it that way, of the world, the training management system can be easily an additional loop of your existing ERP or Oracle or SAP, whatever system, or Wipro or Infosys. But oftentimes what you see in the existing, like PeopleSoft, it's about training administration. It does not have this diagnostic, analytic, strategic part. And if you need that, you have to write a little bit something to fulfill that. 2,000 programs, just taking this case for example. If you use this system, just imagine the immense data. So please, 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 right from the beginning, start thinking about how to digitize. So it will make sense when you have rich data. You can actually do a lot of fancy stuff on it. It's not something about just a quantitative data. Its qualitative part gives you the edge. And without data, nothing you can do. So this is really the point that I want to say.
If you have IT capabilities and people who are very competent in this matter, you could develop your own information system pertaining to 10,015.
Yeah. And we suggest that this quality training manual should be disseminated to all the managers, because really they are the user of your system. Therefore, to put it online, like what I have seen in other companies, the forms are there, everything is there. It's part of your e-management system. It's really handy. And then they very quickly they learn, and they will do a lot of work themselves. They would not really necessarily require the backup or support from the training department. So the idea is do your work smartly, not to do more work. The smart thing is get it organized, stabilized, easy to track, it's transparent, and then I think this you have that. I'm not going to say. I already showed this. So I think if just very quickly have a quick review, it's just to say that I have said it in different words. So here it just basically say that we need to align business with the training very closely. And we need to see evidence of that, because I'm very convinced the figure 2 in your company is not an issue. It's an issue, it's more of a figure 1. And figure 1 requires you have an annual plan. You have an annual plan. You also need to have an annual management review. And this is where you're going to say, we have invested this amount of money, and we have delivered this amount of training for all our staff. You have some statistics, but final account is what difference does it make in that management review. If you can present that management review, you are indeed business partner, because you will see that you can cumulatively, from a program point of view, you will have a business impact. Okay. So, and then all the nice things we have learned by going to Jack Phillips' workshop, will be reality. I'm not his friend, no advertising his book, but I know he's been coming here to do workshops. So I'm just saying, put those things into practice, and you will make yourself a very happy person, and you'll make your company also very pleased about your contribution. So with that, I think I would open up for question and answers and some discussions.
I think there's no more.
Yeah, I think I should show you what you get. Okay, this is a certificate. There are 3 marks, and I think the last, I go from, first of all, is the accreditation mark, which is in the middle, which it says Swiss certification. On the right, that's the ISO 10015 plus mark. That's from adequate, and that will be a registration number underneath.
On the left. There on the left.
Oh. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So on the right, you see IAF. This is actually a mutual recognition chart issued by the International Accreditation Federation. Different governments, in order to ensure the qualification certificate means something, means the same thing. So they have a very stringent peer review process, ensure that the certification body and different actors are actually work according to standards. And this is IAF, and that's the value, I think, means that wherever you go within their system, if you're interested, you can key in IAF.org, .nl in Netherlands. You could see which countries are included. I would say most of the respectable countries are included in this list. So it's a mutual recognition, so you can carry this certificate to different parts. And I think that has a commercial value. Just in case you are interested to know whether we are authentic in terms of our claim, you can go to the Swiss SAS.ch to verify our status. And this is the accreditation certificate that we just got. It is renewed on the 19th of February 2008, and it will be good until 18th of February 2013. So we can relax a little bit. No, I'm joking. They're coming by every year, and they are very tough. So basically, we are subject to the same kind of, except 3 years, we have a 5-year cycle, but every year they're coming by and they're checking up and down, and so we have our own quality management system. So from our own experience, I would say, once you get it right the first time, the life is not so difficult. You just have to follow and have to maintain. And from time to time, you ask yourself the question, is this still the best way of doing it? And so you see that we also have gone through some generations of improvement. And that's what we hope, that any organization is highlighting innovation, adaptation as the key pillar of their success and their sustainability. Then training department, really the learning function need to be a life living example of this claim. So I hope that you, with the systematic approach, that indeed this is no longer a claim or a slogan or a vision, but it will be a reality and a practice. Okay, so that's really everything that I think at this point we want to say. So we open to questions.
Which are the organizations worldwide who have gone for this certification?
Okay, I go back to the origin of the story. The origin of the story is that when we started the reform process in China, we're talking about 10,000 training institutions need to somehow change their ways in order to support the public administrative reform and the market economy. However, we are giving a 3-year mandate and a very limited budget. So the challenge is, how do you create a platform that can be replicated and that can actually make it work? And I think from that we came out with this. So our first initial instinct is actually to go to draft the standard. So that's when we have 1994 to 1999, Raymond was the Swiss delegate and working with 21 countries to draft this standard and be voted 3 rounds in order to make it an international standard. After that, we are hoping this really brilliant piece of work can be adopted by the market. But we realize all the existing quality assurance and quality certification body, they kept it as a secret because this is really going beyond operational management. This has moved into really the strategic part of the organization. So they are not doing anything. So 2003, we decided maybe we should bite the bullet and try to learn the whole thing. What does it mean in reality? And to become a certification body. So we moved, from part of our resources from doing OD work, we got into the quality assurance part. So far we have a limited number of certificates. We have 6 certificates around the world. One company is a telecom company in China. One company is an automobile company in China. Another service company is Ernst & Young, which is their Middle East operation. And Sona is another one. We are preparing one company in the U.S., which is petrochemical, but focusing a lot on the biotechnology. I don't know the term, the proper term. What they do is do the filling for the medicine. I was told 97% of a pill is actually that, and very little bit is the medicine. So they do that. And then also we prepare, it's a Swiss company. We have mentioned the Swiss Re. They have gone through the pre-audit, and they wanted to go for a global, and the global is very challenging. So that process has been stalled at this moment. So we're also starting with UK. So to answer your question, very long routed. I think we're going to break together the past.